Hey, you guys, welcome to Christian Talk with T. I am your host, T. And welcome. Christian Talk is pretty much a safe space where we can talk about the things that we as Christians go through on a day-to-day basis, the struggles that we have on a day-to-day basis. I wanted to create a safe space for topics to be discussed as Christians living in this world, but still walking for Christ, walking with Christ. I wanted to create something that was like more of a conversation. So today's episode is going to be kind of brief. I just want to pretty much talk about who I am and how long I've been a Christian and my individual journey and and how I got here. So I grew up in a single parent household. It was me, my mom, and my sister. And we did grow up in the church. And she was a Christian as she was raising us. So that's pretty much all I've seen. I've only known my mom as a Christian. So we grew up in the church. Me and my sister, we grew up in the church. I remember as a kid, going to church. It seemed like it was every day. It seemed like it was every day. But I remember just being in the church a lot. I was young enough to where I can remember I was able to sleep. I was allowed to sleep in church. So I remember being that young. So yeah, I remember as a kid, just being in the church. I can also remember a time where we were in church and, we were, I heard all this, so I heard a lot of shouting, and I seen this man on, it appeared to be a stage. And, every time he speaks, everybody just hollering and, jumping up. So I thought he was Jesus at the time. So I could remember this, and my mom, she laughs at this all the time. I was sitting there and we were on the balcony at the time, and there was this lady sitting in front of us, and I tapped my mom and I'm like, Mom, I can't see Jesus. She's standing in the way. I can't see Jesus. And she's cracking up and she's like, that's not Jesus, that's the preacher. And I'm like, oh. But in my mind as a kid, I'm like, okay, well, every time this man say something, they get excited. This gotta be Jesus. Who else is this man? So I thought my bishop at the time was Jesus. He was a preacher at the time. Then I think he moved up to a bishop. But yeah, I could just remember little small moments being in church as a little girl. So yeah, we grew up in a church. But when you're that young, you don't really know what's going on. You don't really know what it means to be there. You're just there because your parents are there. So you don't really know the meaning behind why you're there. You just know that you're there, right? So probably at about maybe my early 20s. Yeah, maybe in my early 20s. It was actually my sister. My sister, she was a single parent at the time, and I remember her wanting to go back to our childhood church. This was the same church where I thought my bishop was Jesus. So, oh yeah, we used to go to the church. I remember going to a church in the hotel. And I remember singing in the choir. I can't sing, but I remember singing in the choir. I'm like, I don't know why I was in the choir, because I cannot sing. But I can remember walking up to the front and singing. I don't know how I got there, but I was there. Once we got older, maybe in my early 20s, it was actually my sister's idea. She wanted to find our church home, which was the church that we had been going to pretty much all of our lives. So she found the church, and we began going ourselves, just me, her, and my nephew, which is her son. So we began going to the church. So even at that age, I couldn't really, I didn't really know why I was going. I really honestly was going because my sister was going. So I was just going with her. So, yeah, so that's how we got back into, that's how I got back into going to church, is pretty much through my sister. So, we began going every Sunday faithfully, and then we, begin to get closer to the other young adults and, the other members, and our bishop remembered us and his wife remembered us. So yeah, so that became like our church home again. So while we were going back to our church home, there was a lot of different young adults, and then there were also older women who were like the the leaders of the church. So there was a lady who still to this day I call her my godmom. She's like my elder mom. She kind of like took me under her wing, and she kind of like helped guide me through like the first parts of me getting into the Bible and trying to understand more about God and about Jesus. So shout out to her. She knows exactly who she is. She kind of took me under her wing, and she would be somebody, like she would be like a wise counsel for me, somebody that I was able to confide in, somebody I was able to go to ask questions. I think she actually asked me, if I was reading the Bible, and I told her no. And, she encouraged me to begin in the New Testament, because it's a little easier to understand as a Christian, like why you're a Christian, who Jesus is, and, what he's done and the sacrifices that he's made. So you really can't learn God and Jesus for yourself until you begin to have the experience for yourself. You can go to church every Sunday faithfully, but if you're not reading the word, you're not praying, and you're not seeking that relationship with God to learn him, to understand him, and to be close to him, it can be very just like confusing sometimes. I always wanted to read the Bible, like the entire Bible, but I've never done that. So I've gotten through Genesis. I think I've gotten through the entire book of Exodus, but it's like once I get to Leviticus, I don't know, I just don't get through. I don't get past Exodus. So that's as far as the Old Testament. The New Testament, I've read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I think it's the book of Acts and the book of Proverbs, I think. So yeah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Proverbs, and I think the book of Acts are the books I've read Ruth too. I've read Job. I've read, what's it, First James, First John? One of them. I've read James, the book of James, but I recently read the book of James after watching the show, The Chosen. Listen, let me tell you something. If you have not watched that show, I highly recommend it. It's called The Chosen. It's on Prime Video. And they just recently had season 5 out in movie theaters, and I actually was in the movie theater by myself. It's so powerful. If you have not watched it, I would highly recommend you watch it. But you really have to like be into it to really like to get fed in the way that it feeds you. If you're not paying attention, you could really miss like the message. So you really have to like pay attention to the words for you to really like, for you to really feel it, But yes, if you have not watched The Chosen, I highly recommend it. It's on Prime Video. Season 5 just came out, but they're dropping it in like, I think parts of it every week or something like that. But I think it also, season 5 is only temporarily staying on Prime Video. I think, I'm not sure. But yeah, you should definitely go watch that. But anyway, I recently just read James, And I think it's First John and Second John or something like that. Don't quote me. But yeah. So I read there. So anyway, I'm saying all I have to say, there are a couple books, more than a couple, that I have read in its entirety. I'm going to wrap it up with the scripture of the day. It is, hold on. All right, so this is from the book of James. It's chapter 1, verse 2, and it's about faith and endurance. And it reads, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete and needing nothing." And that's the power of scripture for me, because faith and endurance is like the key to not losing your mind, the key to not going upside nobody's head, the key to making the right decision, even though it's so easy to make the wrong decision. So having faith, trusting in God and enduring any type of troubles that you go through in life, I really think helps you to have the peace and the joy that He truly ultimately wants us to have. So that's a really good scripture. All right, so that's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. We should have a guest, and we're going to get into some really good stuff. Thank you. I'll see you guys next time.